The nightingale came out of faster-than-light travel with a soft shudder, and the brown and gray sphere of RaHFY filled the forward viewport like a wound in space. Captain Sam Lawson stood at the helm, hands clasped behind his back, watching the planet turn below them. Even from orbit, he could see the dark smear where the reactor had blown. A black scar stretched across the northern continent, cutting through what used to be a mining colony of 6,000 souls. "Radiation levels are off the charts on the surface," Pete Marsh said from the communications console. He was a thin man with quick hands and tired eyes, and he had already been awake for 14 hours. "Colony distress beacon is still transmitting. Sounds automated, though. Nobody is talking down there." Sam nodded slowly. "Karen, how are we looking below?" Dr. Karen Price's voice came through the intercom from the medical deck, calm and clear as always. "Triage stations are set up in cargo holds 2 and 3. I have 64 medical staff standing by. We are ready, Captain." "Then let's get to work," Sam said. "Launch the shuttles." The Nightingale was a Mercy-class hospital ship, one of the largest medical vessels in the United Systems fleet. She was painted white, with broad red crosses on her hull, and she broadcast a medical identification beacon on every known frequency at all times. She carried no visible weapons. Her shields were light, designed to deflect debris, not combat fire. To anyone watching, she looked exactly like what she was supposed to be: a floating hospital, fat and slow and harmless. That was the idea, anyway. The first shuttles dropped through the atmosphere and returned 20 minutes later, packed with survivors. Sam watched from the observation deck as the rear bay doors opened, and medics rushed forward with stretchers. The people coming off the shuttles were in terrible shape. Burn victims, radiation sickness, broken bones, crushed limbs, children crying for parents who would never answer, old men staring at nothing with hollow eyes. The smell hit the deck before the stretchers did: burned skin and chemical smoke and fear. Lisa Grant was waiting at Triage Station 1. She was 23 years old, a trauma nurse on her first deep space assignment, and nothing in her training had prepared her for what she saw when those shuttle doors opened. A woman was carried past her on a stretcher, her entire left side blackened and weeping. Behind her came a man holding a small boy who was not moving. Behind him came more and more and more. Lisa's hands were shaking. She looked down at them and willed them to stop. "Nurse Grant." Karen's voice was beside her, steady as stone. The chief medical officer had appeared without a sound, already gloved, already masked. "That woman on stretcher 9 has third-degree burns on 40% of her body. Start a saline drip. Push pain management protocol 3, and prep her for the surgical bay. Can you do that?" Lisa swallowed hard. "Yes, doctor." "Good. Then move." Lisa moved, and once she started working, the shaking stopped. There was no room for fear when someone was dying under your hands. Karen had taught her that on the first day, and now Lisa understood it in her bones. The hours blurred together. Shuttles came and went. The medical bays filled, then overflowed. They set up extra beds in the hallways, in the crew mess, in the chapel. Karen moved through it all like a general on a battlefield, directing her staff with quick, precise commands that never wasted a word. She stitched wounds herself when the surgeons were overwhelmed. She held a dying man's hand for 3 minutes, because no one else could be spared to do it. When he was gone, she wiped her eyes once, pulled on fresh gloves, and moved to the next patient. Sam came down to the medical deck twice during the first 6 hours. He did not get in the way. He carried supplies where they were needed, helped lift patients onto beds, and once held a flashlight steady while a surgeon worked on a child's collapsed lung during a power fluctuation. He was not a doctor, but he knew how to be useful, and his presence reminded the crew that their captain was with them. By the 8th hour, they had brought aboard 412 survivors, humans mostly, but also a handful of Draelith traders who had been on the colony when the reactor blew. Karen treated them all the same. A burned lung was a burned lung, no matter what species it belonged to. It was near the end of the evacuation cycle, when Pete's voice crackled over Sam's personal comm. "Captain, I need you on the bridge." Sam excused himself from the medical deck and took the lift up. When he stepped onto the bridge, Pete was leaning over his console with a deep frown. "I picked up energy signatures at the edge of the system about 2 hours ago," Pete said. "Drive cores. They were faint, and they disappeared fast, like someone was watching, and then pulled back. I logged it and kept monitoring. And now?" Sam asked. "They're back. 3 distinct signatures, Drylith drive patterns, high confidence. They are sitting just outside reliable sensor range, but they are not hiding as well as they think." 3 pale dots flickered at the edge of the screen, barely there, like candle flames in a fog. "Could be a patrol," Sam said. "This is border space. They have a right to be here." "Could be," Pete agreed, "but patrols do not usually go quiet and sit still. Patrols move. These are watching." Sam was quiet for a long moment. Through the viewport, he could see the last shuttle rising from the planet's surface, heavy with the final group of survivors. "Log it," he said. "Full report. Flag it to Fleet Command for when we get back in communication range. And keep watching." "Yes, sir." Sam turned back to the viewport. The planet below was still burning. The shuttle was almost home. 412 people were alive tonight because the Nightingale had come. He allowed himself a small moment of something that was almost peace. Then Pete's console chirped again, louder this time, and the 3 pale dots on the sensor display began to move. They were no longer sitting at the edge of the system. They were coming closer. Sam felt the peace drain out of him like water through a cracked hull. He straightened his back, set his jaw, and reached for the intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. Secure all patients and equipment for possible maneuvering. This is not a drill." He released the button and stared at the approaching signatures. "Pete," he said quietly, "get me everything you can on those ships. I want to know who they are and what they are carrying." "On it, Captain." The Nightingale turned her scarred white hull toward open space and began to move. Heavy and slow, with the weight of 412 lives she had sworn to protect. Behind her, RaHFY kept burning. Ahead of her, something worse was waiting. The 3 ships came out of the dark, like predators rising from deep water. They were Drylith warships, angular, dark-hulled vessels covered in overlapping armor plates that made them look like insects wrapped in iron. The lead ship was massive, nearly twice the size of the Nightingale, with weapon ports running along both flanks like rows of teeth. Her name, translated into human language, was the Fang of Sorrow, and she was a heavy cruiser built for one purpose only: to kill things. The 2 smaller ships flanking her were destroyers, fast and sharp, already spreading apart to form a triangle around the Nightingale. It was a classic blockade formation. Sam had seen it 100 times in tactical simulations during his years in the combat fleet. The triangle meant there was no easy way out. Every direction was covered. "Pete," Sam said calmly, "broadcast our identification. Full medical package, every frequency." His fingers worked the console, and the Nightingale's communication array lit up like a lighthouse. The broadcast went out in standard human, in Drylith trade tongue, and in 3 other common languages, repeating on a loop. It carried the ship's full registry, her medical designation, the number of patients aboard, and the Geneva 16 protection codes that were supposed to make her untouchable under interstellar law. Supposed to. On the bridge of the Fang of Sorrow, Commander Zythari Velnoon listened to the broadcast and smiled. It was not a kind smile. Velnoon was tall even for a Drylith, with dark gray skin and deep-set eyes that were the color of old rust. He had commanded warships for 20 years, and he had risen through the ranks, not through brilliance, but through aggression. He hit hard. He hit first, and he did not stop. "A hospital ship," he said, tasting the words like something sour, broadcasting its weakness to the stars. Sub-Commander RaHFY stood beside him, her posture stiff. She was younger, more careful, and the broadcast made her uneasy. "Commander, the Geneva 16 codes are valid. Firing on a protected medical vessel is a violation of—" "Of what?" Velnoon turned to face her. "Of human rules? Written by humans for humans, to protect human weakness? We did not sign their treaties, RaHFY. Their laws are ink on paper. They mean nothing out here." RaHFY wanted to argue. She could feel the wrongness of this in her chest like a cold stone. But Velnoon was her commander, and on a Dralith warship, the commander's word was law. "Open a channel," Velnoon ordered. The communication screen flickered, and Sam Lawson's face appeared. He was calm, almost impossibly calm for a man whose ship was surrounded by 3 warships. "Dralith vessels, this is Captain Sam Lawson of the United Systems medical ship, Nightingale. We are a protected non-combatant vessel operating under Geneva 16 conventions. We are carrying 412 patients, including Dralith citizens. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Velnoon leaned forward. "Human Captain, I am Commander Velnoon of the Dralith warship Fang of Sorrow. We have intelligence that your so-called hospital ship is transporting weapons through disputed space. You will power down your engines and submit to a full inspection, immediately." Sam did not blink. "Commander, I assure you we are carrying no weapons. We are a medical vessel returning from a disaster relief operation on RaHFY. Our manifest is open for review via data link. I am transmitting it to you now." "I do not want your data," Velnoon said. "I want your ship. Power down, or we will power you down." The channel closed. Sam stood very still for 3 seconds. Then he turned to Pete. "Send a Priority 1 distress signal to the nearest fleet carrier. Everything we have, all channels." Pete tried. His hands moved fast, his face tight with concentration, and then he stopped and looked up with eyes that said what his mouth did not want to. "They are jamming us, Captain. Broadband interference across every long-range frequency. I cannot get a signal out past 100,000 kilometers. We are cut off." The bridge was very quiet. Sam looked at each of his bridge officers in turn. They were not combat crew. They were communication specialists, navigation officers, medical coordinators. Good people, steady people. But they had never been in a fight, and the fear on their faces was as plain as daylight. "All right," Sam said, and his voice was the only steady thing in the room. "Danny." Lieutenant Danny Voss looked up from the tactical console. He was a compact man, broad-shouldered, with a face that gave nothing away. Of everyone on the bridge, he was the only one who did not look afraid. He looked like he was waiting. "Captain," Danny said. "Not yet," Sam said quietly, holding Danny's eyes. "I want to try everything else first." Danny nodded once. "Understood, but when you are ready, I am ready." Sam turned back to the viewport. The Fang of Sorrow hung in space directly ahead, her weapon ports glowing faintly as her systems charged. She was enormous, and she was close, and she was not bluffing. He picked up the intercom. "Dr. Price, this is the captain." Karen's voice came back, tight but controlled. "I can see the ships from the observation port, Sam. How bad?" "Bad. 3 warships. They are demanding we surrender. Comms are jammed. No help is coming." A pause. Then Karen said, "How long do we have?" He gave us 10 minutes. About 7 left now. "Then I am going to keep working," Karen said. "My patients need me." "You do whatever you need to do up there, Sam." The line went dead. On the medical deck, Lisa had heard the captain's announcement. She looked around at the rows of beds, at the burned and broken people who had already survived one disaster today, and she felt something harden inside her chest. It was not courage exactly, It was refusal. A simple, stubborn refusal to accept that these people would survive a reactor meltdown only to die in a crossfire. She bent over her patient, the small girl she had been treating since the first shuttle, and checked the IV line. "You are going to be fine," she whispered. She did not know if she was lying. On the bridge, the clock was running out. Sam stood at the center of it all, thinking. He was not a man who made decisions quickly, but when he made them, he did not look back. The Fang of Sorrow's weapons were fully charged now. The glow from her ports was bright enough to see with the naked eye. Velnoon appeared on the screen again, uninvited. "Your time is almost up, human. I will admit, I expected you to run. Your kind usually does." Sam looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "Commander," he said, "I have 412 patients aboard this ship. Many of them are children. Some of them are your own people. I am asking you, one commander to another, to let us pass in peace." Velnoon stared at him. For a moment, just a moment, something moved behind those rust-colored eyes. Then it was gone. "Surrender," Velnoon said, "or burn." The screen went dark. Sam closed his eyes. He breathed in, he breathed out. Then he opened his eyes, and the man who opened them was not the same man who had closed them. Something had shifted behind his face. Something old and heavy and final. "Danny," he said. Danny's hands were already on the console. "Begin the pre-authorization sequence. Do not fire until I give the word." Danny entered his code. A red light began to pulse, very softly, deep inside the ship. The Nightingale sailed on through the dark, white and scarred and surrounded, carrying 412 lives in her belly and a secret in her spine. And the clock kept ticking. Sam reached for the intercom, and his hand did not shake. Whatever storm was happening inside him, his body had decided to be still. "All hands, this is the captain. I'm going to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty. We are surrounded by 3 Draelith warships. They have demanded our surrender. Our communications are jammed, and no help is coming in time. We have 412 patients aboard who cannot be moved and cannot be abandoned." He paused. Every corridor on the ship was silent. Every ear was listening. "I need all non-essential personnel to move to the inner decks immediately. Secure yourselves and brace for possible impact. Medical staff, continue your work. Your patients need you now more than ever. That is all." He released the button. The bridge crew stared at him. "You heard me," Sam said quietly. "Get to work." They moved. Down in the medical bay, Karen was already redirecting staff. She moved through the triage stations like a current through water. Fast, purposeful, never stopping. She checked IV lines, adjusted ventilator settings, and barked orders with a precision that kept panic at bay. Her people were afraid. She could see it in their eyes. But fear was manageable as long as there was something to do. Karen made sure there was always something to do. She found Lisa in Surgical Bay 4, bent over the small girl from the shuttles. The girl's name was Nora. She was 8 years old, and she had second-degree burns across her back and a broken collarbone. Lisa had been with her since the beginning, and the girl's small fingers were wrapped tight around the nurse's wrist. "Lisa," Karen said. "I am not leaving her," Lisa said without looking up. Karen studied her for a moment, then she nodded. "I did not ask you to. Keep her stable. If we take a hit, cover her with your body and hold on to the bed frame." "Understood." "Yes, doctor." Karen moved on. She had 46 critical patients and 18 staff members in this section alone, and if the Draelith opened fire, the outer surgical bays would be the first to feel it. She took the lift to the bridge. Sam saw her coming and met her at the door. "You should be below," he said. "I should be wherever I am most useful," she replied. "Right now, that is here." She lowered her voice so only he could hear. "I know about the weapons, Sam. I was briefed when I accepted this posting. Whisper protocol." Sam said nothing. "I know what you are thinking. Karen continued. You are thinking about your oath. You are thinking about the kind of man you wanted to be when you left the combat fleet. You are thinking that firing that weapon makes you something you swore you would never be again. Karen, let me finish. Her eyes were hard and bright and absolutely certain. I took an oath too. First, do no harm. But that oath does not mean stand by and watch while someone murders your patients. If those ships open fire, every person on this medical deck will die. Every burned child, every broken miner, every Dralith trader we pulled from the rubble. My oath demands that I protect them. And right now, the only way to protect them is sitting in the spine of this ship. She put her hand on his arm. Do what needs to be done, Sam. I will carry my share of the weight. She turned and walked back to the lift without waiting for a response. Sam watched her go. Then he turned to Danny. Begin full activation, he said. Danny had been waiting for those words. He entered a second authorization code and placed his palm on a biometric scanner that most of the crew did not even know existed. Deep inside the Nightingale, behind 3 layers of armored plating, something woke up. The process was slow by design. Whisper Protocol was not meant to be used in anger. It was meant to be a last resort, a final answer, and every step of its activation was deliberate. First, the safety locks disengaged, 6 of them, each requiring a separate confirmation. Then the hull panels along the ship's dorsal spine began to shift. From the outside, it would have looked like the white plating was breathing, sliding apart centimeter by centimeter to reveal the dark metal underneath. The railgun was the length of the ship's spine, nearly 300 meters of magnetic accelerator coils wrapped around a barrel that could launch a tungsten slug at a fraction of the speed of light. It was powered by the same fusion core that ran the surgical bays, the life support systems, and the lights. When it fired, it would drink power from every system on the ship for exactly 1.4 seconds. The lights would go out. Every heart monitor would flatline for a breath. And then, something on the other end would cease to exist. Danny watched the charge indicators climb. 60%, he said. 90 seconds to full charge. On the Fang of Sorrow, RaHFY noticed something. Her sensor display was showing an energy buildup inside the Nightingale. A strange, concentrated spike that did not match any medical equipment profile she had ever seen. Commander, she said carefully, I am reading an unusual power signature from the human ship. It is centralized along their dorsal axis. I do not recognize it. Valnoon glanced at her screen with disinterest. Their medical systems are probably overloading. Humans build fragile machines to match their fragile spirits. Ignore it. RaHFY did not ignore it. She ran the signature through every database she had access to, and got nothing. That bothered her more than a match would have. Unknown signatures meant unknown capabilities, and unknown capabilities from a cornered enemy were the most dangerous things in the universe. But she said nothing more. Valnoon had made his decision, and on this ship, that was the end of the conversation. On the Nightingale's bridge, Danny said, 95%, 30 seconds. Sam picked up the open broadcast channel. He spoke slowly, clearly, and without emotion. This is Captain Sam Lawson of the hospital ship Nightingale. We are a protected medical vessel, carrying 412 patients, including citizens of the Dralith Empire. We have asked you to stand down. We have shown you our manifest. We have appealed to every law and every principle of decency that exists between our peoples. He paused. We will not ask again. On the Fang of Sorrow, Valnoon heard the broadcast and felt a flicker of something he did not recognize. It was not fear. He did not know how to be afraid. But the human's voice had changed. It was not the voice of a man pleading for mercy. It was the voice of a man who had finished being patient. Valnoon crushed the feeling and turned to his weapons officer. All ships open fire. Full barrage. Reduce them to scrap. The 3 Drelith warships fired at once. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds streaked across the darkness and slammed into the Nightingale's forward shields. The shields held for 2 seconds, then buckled. The first kinetic round punched through and struck Deck 7. The hull tore open. Atmosphere screamed out into the vacuum before the emergency bulkhead slammed shut. The second volley hit the port side. Deck 8 ruptured. A triage station collapsed. 2 nurses were thrown off their feet. Equipment crashed and shattered, and sparks rained from the ceiling. In Surgical Bay 4, the lights went red, and the floor heaved, and Lisa threw herself over Nora's bed, wrapping her arms around the rails, just like Karen had told her. The girls screamed. Lisa held on, and did not let go. On the bridge, Sam caught himself on the command rail, as the ship bucked under him. Alarms screamed from every console. Hull breach warnings flashed across the main display. He looked at Danny. Danny looked back at him. The tactical display showed the railgun at full charge. A single green light pulsed on his console, steady and patient. Sam did not hesitate. Fire. Danny pressed the button, and the Nightingale bared her teeth. The lights went out. Every light on every deck of the Nightingale went dark at the same instant. The ventilators stopped. The heart monitors flatlined. The hum of the fusion core, so constant that the crew had forgotten it was there, dropped to a whisper. For 1.4 seconds, the entire ship held its breath. And in that silence, the railgun fired. There was no sound. In the vacuum of space, there never is. But if anyone had been watching from outside, they would have seen the Nightingale's spine light up with a pale blue flash that ran the entire length of her hull, bow to stern, like lightning trapped in bone. A tungsten slug, the size of a small car, left the barrel at 4% of the speed of light, fast enough to cross the distance between the Nightingale and the Fang of Sorrow, in less than the time it takes a human heart to beat once. The slug hit the Fang of Sorrow just forward of her reactor housing. It did not slow down. Drelith armor was among the best in the known galaxy. Layered composites over reinforced alloy over magnetic shielding, designed to absorb plasma fire, deflect kinetic rounds, and shrug off torpedo impacts. The Fang of Sorrow wore it like a second skin, thick and proud and seemingly unbreakable. The railgun slug went through it the way a needle goes through paper. It entered through the forward dorsal plate, passed through 3 interior decks without stopping, punched clean through the reactor housing, and exited through the ventral hull, in a shower of molten metal and superheated gas. The entire transit took less than 1/10 of a second. The Fang of Sorrow did not even have time to register the impact before the damage was done. The reactor, breached and exposed, did the rest. The explosion started as a white point of light in the cruiser's midsection, no bigger than a fist. Then it grew. It grew fast. The light swallowed the reactor room, then the engineering section, then the surrounding decks, expanding outward in a sphere of white fire that tore the ship apart from the inside. The Fang of Sorrow broke in two, her forward section spinning away in one direction, while her aft section tumbled in another, both trailing fire and debris and atmosphere that froze into crystals the moment it touched the vacuum. On the Nightingale's bridge, the lights came back on. The heart monitors resumed their steady beeping. The ventilators hummed back to life. The fusion core climbed back to full output, and the ship was alive again, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Danny's tactical display told the story in cold, simple numbers. 1 Drelith heavy cruiser, destroyed. Kill confirmed. Time from firing to destruction, 3.7 seconds. Nobody on the bridge spoke. On the 2 remaining Drelith destroyers, there was chaos. The officers had watched their flagship, the largest, most heavily armored ship in their hunting group, come apart in a single hit. One hit. From a hospital ship. The tactical channels erupted with overlapping voices. half of them screaming questions, half of them screaming orders, and none of them making sense. Danny was already working. His hands moved across the console with the practiced calm of a man who had trained for exactly this moment for 3 years, and had hoped every single day that it would never come. The Railgun's magnetic coils were cycling, dumping waste heat, and realigning for a second shot. The process took 40 seconds. 40 seconds was a long time in a battle, but Danny had planned for that too. Railgun cycling, he said. 40 seconds to second firing solution. Both destroyers are holding position. They have not powered weapons. Sam gripped the command rail. His knuckles were white. Pete, open broadcast. All frequencies. Pete opened the channel. His hands were trembling, but his voice controls were steady. Sam spoke. Attention, remaining Draelith vessels. This is Captain Sam Lawson of the Nightingale. The Fang of Sorrow has been destroyed. You have seen what this ship carries. I am giving you one chance. Withdraw now, immediately, and you will not be harmed. Stay, and you will share the same fate. You have 30 seconds to decide. He cut the channel and stared at the viewport. The wreckage of the Fang of Sorrow drifted between them, glowing and jagged, 2 broken halves of what had been the most powerful ship in the system 5 seconds ago. Escape pods were launching from the aft section, small, dark shapes tumbling away from the dying hull. In one of those pods, Sub-Commander RaHFY was alive. She had been thrown across the bridge when the slug hit. The impact had shattered her console and killed the 2 officers standing beside her. She had crawled through a collapsing corridor with a broken arm and blood running into her eyes, found the nearest escape pod, and launched it with 4 seconds to spare before the reactor blew. Now she floated in the dark, watching through the pod's small viewport as the remains of her ship drifted apart. The fire was already dying. She thought of Velnoon and wondered if he had made it to a pod. She doubted it. The forward section, where the bridge had been, had taken the worst of the blast. She stared at the Nightingale, hanging in space, with her white hull and her red crosses, and the long, thin line of dark metal visible along her spine, where the hull panels had not yet closed. A hospital ship. They had attacked a hospital ship, and the hospital ship had killed them. RaHFY felt something she had never felt before in her military career. It was not anger, or grief, or even shame. It was the cold, clear understanding that everything she had been taught about humans was wrong. They were not weak. They were not soft. They were something far more dangerous. They were kind, and they had learned to protect that kindness with teeth. On the bridge of the destroyer Palethorn, the young captain, a Draelith named Korath, was screaming at his weapons officer to target the Nightingale. He was barely 30, promoted too fast, full of fire and fury, and the absolute certainty that retreat was the same as death. "Fire everything," he shouted. "Torpedoes, plasma, everything. They cannot have another shot ready yet." The weapons officer hesitated. He had just watched a heavy cruiser die in one hit. But Korath was his captain, and training won over common sense. He launched a spread of 6 torpedoes. On the Nightingale, Danny tracked the incoming warheads on his display. 6 torpedoes inbound from the near destroyer. Impact in 12 seconds. Railgun is charged. "Target the torpedo source," Sam said. Danny did not need to be told twice. He adjusted the firing solution in 3 seconds, locked the targeting system on the Palethorn's engine block, and fired. The lights went out again. The ventilators stopped. 1.4 seconds of silence. The second slug crossed the gap and hit the Palethorn dead center in her engine section. The impact was not as spectacular as the first. The destroyer was smaller, less armored, and the slug passed through her so cleanly that for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then her engines died. All of them, all at once, like a candle blown out. The ship went dark, drifting, powerless, and the 6 torpedoes she had launched lost their guidance signals and spiraled off into empty space, detonating harmlessly thousands of kilometers away. The third destroyer, the Bitter Wind, did not wait to see more. Her captain was older and wiser, and he had seen enough. The ship's drives flared white, and she jumped to faster-than-light speed, so fast that she left an afterimage on the Nightingale's sensors. She was gone. Silence returned to the bridge. Danny leaned back in his chair. All threats neutralized or withdrawn. Railgun is cycling to standby. Closing hull panels. Along the Nightingale's spine, the white plating slid back into place, centimeter by centimeter, covering the dark metal underneath. When it was done, the ship looked like what she had always appeared to be, a hospital ship, fat and slow and harmless. Sam let go of the command rail. He looked at his hands. They were shaking badly now, trembling like leaves, and he could not make them stop. "Pete," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "The jamming should be down now. Send the distress signal. Full report. Tell them we need a battle group and a medical resupply. Tell them we have casualties." "Ours?" Pete asked quietly. "Theirs too," Sam said. "There are escape pods out there. Those are people. Get them." Pete stared at him for a moment. Then he nodded slowly and opened the channel. Sam walked to the viewport and stood there alone, looking out at the wreckage and the escape pods and the distant stars. He had left the combat fleet because he did not want to kill anyone ever again. He had chosen the Nightingale because she was supposed to be a place of healing, a place where he could do nothing but good. Today he had destroyed a cruiser and crippled a destroyer and killed God only knew how many people. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in silence, and the Nightingale sailed on through a field of debris that had once been the most dangerous thing in the system. Now the most dangerous thing in the system was the hospital ship herself. And she was already calling for help, not for herself, but for the people she had just defeated. The battle group arrived 6 hours later. 4 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in formation. The carrier Resolute, flanked by 3 destroyers, their weapon ports hot and their shields at full power. They came ready for a fight. What they found instead was a battered white hospital ship, running her lights at half power, surrounded by a slowly expanding cloud of wreckage, quietly picking up escape pods. Captain Greg Holt of the Resolute stood on his bridge and stared at the scene through the forward viewport for a long time before he said anything. He could see the Nightingale clearly. Her hull was scorched and dented, with visible breaches on decks 7 and 8, sealed by emergency plating. Red crosses still glowed on her flanks, though one of them was cracked and flickering. Beyond her, the broken halves of the Fang of Sorrow drifted in silence, cooling, dead. "That is a Dralith heavy cruiser," his tactical officer said. "Or it was." "I can see that," Holt said. "Sir, the Nightingale is hailing us. Put her through." Sam Lawson's face appeared on the screen. He looked 10 years older than his file photo. His eyes were red, and there were dark circles under them, and his uniform collar was stained with something that might have been blood or might have been hydraulic fluid. "Captain Holt," Sam said, "thank you for coming." Holt looked at him, then looked at the wreckage, then looked back at him. "Hell of a shift, Captain." Sam almost smiled. It did not quite reach his eyes. Holt brought the Resolute alongside the Nightingale within the hour. Supply shuttles began ferrying medical equipment, replacement parts, and fresh personnel across the gap between the ships. Engineers boarded to assess the hull damage. Combat medics came to relieve the exhausted medical staff. And Sam gave the order that surprised no one who knew him and confused everyone who did not. "Launch search and rescue for all Dralith survivors," he said. "Every escape pod, every piece of wreckage large enough to hold a living being. Find them and bring them aboard." The rescue operation took 3 hours. They pulled 41 Draylet survivors from the remains of the Fang of Sorrow, and another 68 from the crippled Pale Thorn, which was still drifting, dark and powerless, about 200 kilometers from the Nightingale. The Pale Thorn's crew had been lucky. The railgun slug had destroyed their engines, but spared the crew compartments. Most of them were alive, shaken and stunned, but breathing. Sub-Commander RaHFY was among the first to be recovered. Her escape pod was brought into the Nightingale shuttle bay, and when the hatch opened, she stepped out with her broken arm cradled against her chest, and her face set in the expression of someone who was prepared to be treated as a prisoner of war. Instead, a human nurse met her with a stretcher and a warm blanket. "Please sit down," the nurse said. "We are going to take care of your arm." RaHFY did not sit. She stood in the shuttle bay and looked around. She saw human medics treating Draylet wounded on stretchers lined up along the wall. She saw IV bags and bandages, and a surgeon consulting with a translator about the proper dosage of pain medication for Draylet physiology. She saw the same crew that had destroyed her ship, now working, calmly and without anger, to save her people's lives. She sat down on the stretcher and said nothing. Karen found her an hour later in Medical Bay 2. RaHFY's arm had been set and wrapped in a lightweight cast, and she was sitting on the edge of a bed, staring at the far wall. Karen checked the cast, examined the swelling, and adjusted the pain medication without a word. "Why?" RaHFY said. Karen looked up. "Why what? Why are you helping us?" RaHFY's voice was quiet and confused, and underneath the confusion there was something raw. "We attacked you. We fired on your ship. We tried to kill your patients. Your captain destroyed my ship and my commander and my crew." She paused. "And now you are fixing my arm." Karen finished adjusting the IV drip and sat down on the stool beside the bed. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was the same voice she used with every patient, steady, warm, and completely honest. "Because that is what this ship does," she said. "We are a hospital. You are hurt. That is the beginning and the end of it." "Your people are strange, Doctor," Karen said. She stood and patted RaHFY gently on the shoulder of her good arm. "Get some rest. You are safe here." She walked away to check on the next patient. In a corridor on Deck 5, Lisa Grant sat on the floor with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up to her chest. She was still wearing her medical scrubs. They were stained with blood, human, Draylet. She had stopped telling the difference hours ago. Her hands were clean because she had scrubbed them raw under the tap until the skin was pink and burning, but she could still feel the ghost of it between her fingers. She was not crying. She had moved past crying about an hour ago and arrived at a place that was just empty and quiet, like the space between stars. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. It was Ben Keller, one of the senior medics. He was a big man with a soft voice and a gray beard, and he had been on the Nightingale for 7 years. He had seen things that would keep most people awake for the rest of their lives, and he carried it all behind a pair of kind eyes that never seemed to judge. He did not say anything. He just sat down beside her on the floor, his back against the same wall, his legs stretched out in front of him. They sat together in silence for a while. "Is it always like this?" Lisa asked. "No," Ben said. "Sometimes it is worse. Sometimes it is better. Today was bad." "I covered a little girl with my body," Lisa said. "When the ship was hit, I didn't think, I just did it." "That is because you are a good nurse," Ben said simply. "I do not feel like a good nurse. I feel like I'm going to fall apart." Ben nodded slowly. "You might. That's okay. You can fall apart tonight and put yourself back together tomorrow. You do not have to be strong all the time, Lisa. You just have to come back." Lisa wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Does it get easier?" Ben thought about it honestly, the way he did everything. "No," he said, but you get stronger, and that is not the same thing, but it is enough. They sat together in the quiet corridor, while the ship hummed around them, and after a while Lisa leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes, and Ben stayed right where he was. 3 days later, the news broke. The Drelith government issued a formal statement disavowing Commander Velnoon's attack on the Nightingale. They called it an unauthorized action by a rogue officer acting outside his mandate. They expressed regret for the loss of life. They did not apologize. The Drelith did not apologize. But the language was as close to an apology as their species had ever come. Diplomatic channels between human and Drelith space, frozen for nearly a year, reopened within a week. The existence of Whisper Protocol was never officially confirmed. The United Systems military issued no statement about the Nightingale's armament. No press conference was held. No admiral stood behind a podium to explain how a hospital ship had killed a heavy cruiser. But word traveled, the way it always does in space. Quietly, through back channels, through whispered conversations between traders and diplomats and intelligence officers. Within a month, every spacefaring species in the known galaxy had quietly updated their threat assessments of human medical vessels. Nobody fired on a hospital ship again. Sam filed his after-action report from a small desk in his quarters, 3 days after the battle. He wrote it carefully, in plain language, without drama or self-pity. He described the events exactly as they had happened. He noted the lives lost: 11 crew members on the Nightingale, an estimated 240 on the Fang of Sorrow, and 31 on the Pale Thorn. He wrote about every decision he made and why he made it. At the end of the report, he added a personal note. I regret the loss of life that occurred during this engagement. I regret that the Drelith crew of the Fang of Sorrow and the Pale Thorn were placed in a situation where their commander's choices led to their deaths. I do not regret defending my ship, my crew, and my patients. I would make the same choices again. The Nightingale's mission is to heal, but I have learned that sometimes, to keep healing, you have to bare your teeth. He signed the report, sealed it, and sent it through the encrypted channel. 2 weeks later, the Nightingale undocked from the repair station at Callaway Point. Her hull was patched and repainted, white and clean, with fresh red crosses glowing on her flanks. The breaches were sealed. The surgical bays were restocked. New crew members had come aboard to replace those who had been injured or transferred. Lisa Grant was still there. She had been offered a transfer to a station-based hospital, somewhere safe and quiet and far from the frontier. She had turned it down. I am not finished here, she told Karen simply. Karen had nodded, and that was the end of it. The Nightingale turned her bow toward open space and engaged her drive. The medical beacon pulsed from her hull, steady and bright, broadcasting her identity to anyone who was listening. Somewhere out on the frontier, someone needed help. The Nightingale was coming.